Number 6, Central City Revitalization and Housing Committee meeting report, presentation, Councilman Todd Pearsall, Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We had a Central City Revitalization and Housing meeting on Wednesday, February 19th at 3:30, and we are going to, or I should say, I am going to break this down as briefly as possible. The meeting itself was, what were we in there, about 5 hours?
7:30.
4.5 hours. So we're going to not cover everything we did in that meeting in the hopes of brevity tonight. But having said that, the first item we had on our agenda was from the Building and Development Task Force. They brought us 3 items earlier that they wanted us to consider, and there was some discussion with staff about those 3 items. And then they brought forth 3 new items. And I'll just go over the action taken because you have all of the information that they presented to the committee in your agenda tonight. But the committee voted in 3-0 to, number 1, forward the request to repeal the park and recreation fees to the Planning Commission for consideration. And number 2, forward to the Council Utilities Committee the request to modify the city's water and sewer expansion fees. The Central City Committee didn't feel like those were 2 issues that should be decided in our committee for recommendations to the council, so we're sending one to the Planning Commission and one to the Utilities Committee. So just to let you know where those were going. Also, the committee had requested staff to provide information back to the Utilities Committee on a reimbursement policy for installation of water and sewer lines by developers, and also to provide information regarding the collection of parks and recreation fees and the projected use of those funds. And that is to aid those 2 different bodies in decisions on the requests that were made by the Building and Development Task Force. The second item was an ideal application for Eurostar Construction, and the committee discussed the 3 applications for upfit and facade improvements to the buildings at 200 West Main, which is formerly the Tarkus Law Office building. It's adjacent to the west side of the South Street Plaza Pavilion, and the grants that were applied for were for the improvement of the 2 apartments that were constructed on the 2nd floor of the building and the commercial space, which is on the 1st floor. And there was much discussion with the committee as we discussed the grant options that were presented by staff. And after discussion, the committee voted unanimously 3-0 to recommend to full council to provide a grant of $7,500 for the upfit and facade improvements to the 2 apartments that are upstairs. We postponed a decision for the request to grant assistance on the commercial space until it has actually been completed, and we have requested the owner to resubmit that ideal application for the grant assistance when he completes those. In your agenda packets, you will notice there are some photographs, and I know some of the council members, myself included, have actually had a chance to view these residences. They're beautiful, beautiful additions to downtown, and the owner has spent a considerable amount of money making these nice and making them definitely a addition to our downtown. So we felt like the $7,500 was certainly. There's 2 up there, and they were leased before he ever even finished them. That's how nice they were. So I would like to go ahead and make the motion to the council that we go ahead and approve the $7,500 for Eurostar Construction on those 2 apartments.
I will second.
Any discussion? Yep, Dr. Curley.
Yeah, just somebody give me an update on our available funds in that program right now.
Rachel, we discussed that in the meeting, but so many different numbers were discussed. But
I understand.
I think Rachel has that for us here.
Wondered what was left in the checkbook.
At the time that this grant was considered, there was $15,700 available.
And the follow-up to that would be, when would additional funds be available in that program?
In the new fiscal year,
July.
beginning the new fiscal year.
And how much will that be?
Well, each year, the city, what we really do, city council, determines how much we want to put in that item. We get about $120,000 of MSD taxes. 60,000 of it goes to the conference center. The other dollars go to maintenance, the 212 West Main, some expenses there, other items, some promotional items, and then we've been running around $19,000 a year in ideal funds. But that is something that's elastic and up for the city council's determination. So for instance, this next year, if the council wanted to, could elect to spend 25 or 30 or $40,000 or whatever you feel comfortable. You just have the other line items in your budget. And if you'd like, we could break that out separately when we go through the budget process to show you those line items. And so the council may want to move those things around a bit. There's nothing really sacred about any of those pieces.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Vote, ready to vote, all in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem, the third item on our agenda that night was an art space proposal and downtown parking considerations. I'm sure everyone on the council and a lot listening knows that Gastonia and Art Space are jointly exploring the option to have an art space facility here in Gastonia. Through some research that they did and criteria that they have, Art Space identified the parking lot at South and Franklin as a preferred location for their potential development. And staff came up with several options for parking solutions and different things. So that these are in your agenda as well. You'll see the different maps. If that parking were to be not an option anymore, shall we say, what other options would be available? At the committee meeting, we heard from members of St. Stephen's Church and also Support Inc. And I actually had several follow-up conversations after that meeting. There were quite a few people there. Great conversation. We found out that there was, for example, with St. Stephen's Church, they were concerned about the loss of parking, but come to find out through dialogue and discussion that that parking lot wasn't even sufficient for their parking needs, that long-term they needed more than that. So now we have city staff talking with them to see if we can find more permanent solutions. Great conversation with Support Inc. They are concerned about if a building was built on that particular lot, what the construction would do to disrupt their business, but at the same time, they're very supportive of the project and want to work with the city as much as they can. So great discussion there. I think it's probably discussions that needed to be had, and obviously no decisions were made on that, but I'll read you the result. The committee accepted the discussion for informational purposes only and no action was taken. The committee further directed staff to evaluate the comments received at the meeting and to continue to look into options and solutions to the concerns raised. And further discussion will continue at the next Center City Downtown Committee meeting, which we touched on earlier, will be March 12th. And everyone is welcome to attend that if they want, if they have any discussion or would like to add to the discussion that we'll have on that. But it requires no action on the council at this time. Item 4 was a discussion of the, oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Todd, just one thing that came up that I think is an important facet of the parking issue, and we've discussed it a little bit. And I'm going to throw this over to you, Ed. How many spaces are currently, we have the specific parking lot, but in essence, it's being used to park a number of our meter monitoring vehicles, and I believe the personally owned vehicles of those that are employees that operate those vehicles. Approximately, in approximation, what are we talking about of available spaces at that location that are not being used by the city at this time? I think it was in around 44,
Yeah, there are about
correct?
84 total spaces. And as I recall, and Rusty's here to check me, I guess, that about almost half of them are city spaces. So there's probably about being displaced about at the most 50 spots. So a good half of them are not, 40. You remember, Rusty, do you have the exact number? He's counting, yeah. But it's about half of them.
Thank you.
Simple arithmetic.
Thank you.
Just count. And Rusty, when you get that number, if you'll just pass it on to
Blurt it
Councilman
out.
Kimball.
City manager.
Also, these parking options it was a very interesting conversation that we had with the city staff about them, because as we were talking about it, whether we do art space at that location or not, some of these are interesting changes we might want to make anyway. And I would like the council to really take a look at them. One of them is the conference center. For instance, opening that up, just making it free parking except for special events. And also some of the other things, some of what we were doing on South Street. So please take a look at those. Those are something that we might want to do anyway. But I know we had a really good conversation internally about what's the right thing to do. I think the council should do something similar and take a look at those.
And some of these options, some of these options are not cost the city anything. Some of the options would cost the city a great deal of money. So that's why they're interesting and why you want us to really look at them.
That's correct, and there were actually a couple other options that we didn't include. They were even a little more expensive, and of course there are infinite number of options. You could build a whole nother deck, basically behind the Garland Center or something like that. But those are really, really big dollars. But if you look at, say, for instance, South Street, this is really returning, instead of the windy road that we have on South since the 70s, and it's the same thing on Main, do we start to move that sidewalk back and create more parking spaces? A lot to discuss, and we're trying to do the best for the center city to make it more vital to provide parking, but also to provide activity. And so, yes.
Councilman Gallagher.
Now, if we lose those parking spaces over there, and we have a cost to develop more parking spaces, because each one of these items in this picture have a different cost to them, shouldn't that be borne by Art Space themselves?
We really haven't discussed price.
Right.
What
I
we
know
would
that,
sell.
but what I'm saying is, if we're gonna lose 80 spots, and we have to find 80 spots, and, it's all if, whatever costs we have to find the 80 spots, I think that should be borne by Art Space. The other thing is, has anybody else come up for buildings within downtown that Art Space would be curious to look at?
There were about 30 or 40 different options, and I think I expressed it to them directly, and I think most all of us did, that we were hoping that they would find the older buildings and put a couple of them together and deal with some of our toughest. I would like them to fix the toughest nuts that we have downtown, and I told them that. And they're trying to make it as simple and easy as possible to get the project done and control their costs, and dealing with the property, determining ownership and making sure that they could get a deal done and get moved straight forward, led them to a city site, and because you know who you're dealing with the city, it's perhaps not as complicated as if they have to put 3 or 4 properties together. And the other was they liked new construction because it was simple. But remember, when we looked at Art Spaces, what they've done across the country, in many cases they did go into old buildings, and I think that was really all our first preference, was to do that. But they found problems with each. They were too small, not configured right. But since that meeting that we had, I've actually had some individual property owners downtown say, what about our buildings? Can you take a second look? So we are going to talk to them later on this week and talk to them about, take second looks at some of these other properties. But as the chairman said, this is their first choice. This is where they think this is the best site.
Yeah, I want to specify, this is not a discussion on, is Art Space coming to Gastonia, how much anything's going to cost. This was Art Space saying, we've got criteria on what we decide is the best building site for us. This is their number one choice. They have a list. They have a number 2, a number 3, a number 4. So they come to the city and they're saying, this is our number one choice. Will this work? Well, immediately the city says, well, that's public parking. If you build a building there, what are we gonna do with the parking? So this is what this discussion is about. If this is going to continue to move forward, we need to solve the parking issue. Even if we solve the parking issue, that may not end up being the site that's selected. We know that we have to solve the parking problem first before we can tell ArtSpace, okay, we solved the parking issue, let's move to the next step. And so this really is just all about parking. We have no idea what monetary contributions we'd get from ArtSpace or we'd give to ArtSpace or anything else. Those way down the line, yeah. So this is only about parking at this point, so.
Dr. Crowell.
Ed, to this point in time, have we charged any parking fees in the conference center deck?
Yes, and this past year was like $1,500, and the year before that was about $3,000 per year. So if you think about it, for a whole year, we got $3,000, and last year was $1,500. Part of also the way the conference center management group has been negotiating their deals is that they would comp the parking. Now, that is revenue that could come to us, but as you can see, it's really negligible right now. And we were both we were really surprised, weren't we, that it was 3,020, I guess, was it annually, or what were those numbers?
First year of operation, I think.
Yeah, first.
It was 3,000, and then the last fiscal year was approximately half that.
Yeah, and see, for $1,500 a year, you know, and how many parking spaces are there?
There are 165, 69 plus or minus in parking.
And then the surface lot in addition, yeah. So that's.
So
you know,
I
we
do
just
think
open it?
you're right. I do think you're right. This needs to be a discussion at some
Yeah.
point, that we look at this seriously, because, you know, one of the ways we can help entice people downtown is to let them know that there is that free parking, if we choose to do that. Okay. We could do that for 5 years until parking really became a problem, and then we could, you know, say, well, now we're gonna have to start charging something because parking is such a premium. Who knows?
We think ultimately should be charged, but we perhaps are ahead of ourselves with that, you know, and you could do it in 2.5 years or 7 years or whenever
Sure.
that market catches up
Right.
up to it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Councilman McIntyre.
Thank you. I support ArtSpace coming to Gastonia, say that first. I don't support them going to this parking lot. We don't have enough ground level parking as it is. It's conveniently located for a lot of folks. We know a lot of new businesses that come along, a pizza place, a little nail salon, and a couple other things coming right here on South Street. A lot of people are gonna depend on parking across the street over there. Sometimes for the church and Support Incorporated have a lot of mental health patients, it's not convenient for them to walk across Franklin and park at the conference center. But having said that, one location I don't think Mr. Sumner told me they looked at is the Carruthers Funeral Home property. You can get there on and off 321, 2nd Avenue and York, and it's right there on the edge of York Chester, which is on the other side. Great location. They got several buildings there that would be for sale. If they sell that property, I imagine they will. It's a large footprint there, and I would hope that ArtSpace could look at that property and try to negotiate maybe a price, and maybe this company could donate some of that land to them as a tax write-off, as they're building a new facility down South New Hope Road. And I would hope we would encourage them to take a look at that property. I talked to Mr. Sumner, who's a friend of mine, and I think a lot of him. He said, well, that's not right in downtown. I said, well, it's just one block as a crow flies from that parking lot over to Carruthers. I mean, that's not very far. And you have a big footprint. It's a nice area around the edge of York Chester. A building has attorneys in it. It's a very safe area. And I would hope they would take a look at that and consider that. How far away from downtown? I mean, one block, that's not very much. So I would hope they would consider looking at that, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Councilman Kimball.
Within that ambit of discussion, I think we also, and I take what you said, Doctor, very, really to heart, is certainly there is a point where we could be utilizing possibly that space from the conference center. However, we also need, I believe, to be cognizant, and I raised this issue at our meeting, it's a slippery slope, because we do want to entice more and larger events and corporations to come to the conference center. The other side being, if the parking lots are full, where or how do they get parking? And I don't have a clear-cut answer on that, but I would implore that we do keep in mind that we don't want to compete against ourselves sometimes, because then we never win. So I think that we need to keep that within the ambit of the discussion, that we don't want to get too much parking there, and then when prospective folks come to utilize the conference center, well, your parking lot's full. Where are you going to park? So there's got to be a balance there, and that's all I'm saying. We need to strike some type of balance that works for us now and in the future. I think you want that too.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, next item.
Okay, now that we're back to the actual report, item number 4 is the discussion of the 2014 Summer Concert Series. As council will remember, during one of our budget planning meetings, we talked about summer concert series and would the city be participating in that, and there seemed to be a majority favor for the city to continue something like that. So we've had several meetings with the Central City Committee, and the committee reviewed and discussed in detail 5 different options along with the estimated event costs for a possible summer concert series. And the last meeting, we had a presentation by city staff, Ms. Melanie Signs of Events on Main. And in that proposal that we heard, the committee voted unanimously 3-0 to recommend to the full council to fund 3 concerts featuring additional intermission entertainment, which was option number 3, at a city participation level of $7,500 per event. The concerts will be held the first Friday in May, June, and August, with a potential rain date in September. Existing and fiscal year 14 and 15 budgets would have to be modified to accommodate the city participation in funding, and the July 4th event would be similar to last year's. So that would be the city's involvement as far as monetary spending for events. Like I said, we had 5 different options to go with. There was a lot of discussion on that. But we did vote 3-0 on this option, and I would like to bring that forward in the form of a motion that we do fund 3 different concerts on the dates listed as $7,500 per event.
I will second.
Any discussion?
So that's 22,000.
Just a minute. Dr. Curlin.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at this historically a little bit, just seeing, because this seems like a little bit more money than we've spent in the past, and this may be falling into your question too, Jim. Yeah, so if that's 22.5 or something like that, I guess the first question would be is where are those funds coming from?
We would look to those funds in that same budget that we just talked about, which is the MSD downtown district funds. So if the council wants, because again, it's one of those things, you can spend more money or less money in any of these items. If we spend more money here, and then that will give us funding for downtown festivals. That's where historically the funding has come from. But it doesn't have to be. I mean, we can go other places, but historically we first have gone to the downtown district funds.
Okay, and then the follow-up to that is, who would be managing those funds?
Managing what funds?
If you have a budget and it's $7,500 for a concert, okay, who is going to be determining the budget for that concert? That $75 is going to pay for a variety of things, obviously entertainment and other things. So I know in the past, Melanie was organizing and doing those. So is she going to continue to do these, or are these under the auspices of the city, or is there some combination, or how's this working?
The proposal that you see would be for this coming summer, because it is such a late date. It would be, the city would contract with Events on Main at that set price. The details of the contract would have to be worked out as far as, when payment was made and that kind of thing, but that's who the contract would be with, yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. What I'm hearing is, we'll have an independent contractor who's going to be actually managing these events.
Correct.
And the city will provide in-kind services where appropriate, as we've done in the past. But the actual details of the event, all the management of the event is going to be handled by an independent contractor.
Correct.
Okay, okay.
And just to answer your first question, you said it sounded like a lot. Actually, this is less than what's been spent in previous years.
That's not including the Fourth of July fireworks, though, is it?
No, but the city
So-
does the 4th of July fireworks every year. Whether there's an event or not, they do the fireworks.
Okay. So,
The fireworks are budgeted for.
so the 22.5, though, I mean, I'm just taking a quick peek at this stuff, and I don't see anywhere that adds up to 22.5, so just kind of help me out, because you're making that statement, I'm not sure.
We've got the numbers all the way back to 2008. There's a city investment for $4,000 for a movie. Summer 2009, city investment of $30,000 to cover 4 bands. City investment of $950 for movie rights.
Okay, I didn't go back to 2009, you can
Yeah, I
stop
mean-
right there. So that pretty much, that's your $7,500.
It is,
That's fine, I just need some perspective, that's all.
yeah, and what we asked what made us kind of go with this proposal, because we were hesitant on, could you even still get a summer concert series in at this late date to start planning? And I think what kind of tipped it for me was these are going to be a little bit larger than just putting a band on a stage. They're going to be full-out concerts with lights, entertainment. I mean, it's going to be a show. And for $7,500 a piece, we felt like that was pretty good bargain, because we were paying even more than that just to put a band on a stage.
Right.
So we were like, okay, if you're going to give us all the extras for a little bit less, we'll give you a shot. We'll let you see what you can do. So that's kind of how we felt about it.
Councilman Gallagher, you had a question?
Yes. Now, on page 632, it says that cost per concert is $7,500, and it says there's 4 concerts for $30,000 for a total series. Now,
That was in the original discussion, but not what the committee recommended.
so there's only 3.
We recommended 3 at $7,500 apiece.
And how much is it for the 4th? Do we know?
The
Is that
four-
11,000?
That's for the fireworks. The city only provides in-kind services on the 4th. The city does not pay any other, well,
Okay.
except maybe Porta Johns.
Okay,
But they do not
Yeah.
fund anything else on the 4th.
okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
Put that in the form of a
I
motion.
did.
There's a second.
That's correct.
There's a motion on the floor. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, we have one last item. Item number 5, and other related matters. There was a discussion of a proposed lease agreement for 212 West Main, and that was not undertaken and was continued until the next meeting due to the length that the meeting ran. And just to give you guys a little background on that, this is the upper levels of Arts on Main. There's additional offices, probably about 6 office spaces up there that potentially the city could lease for other income to help with maintenance of that building. So we will be going over potential contracts and how we want to write that up and stuff, but we'll pick that up at the next meeting. And that was the end of our meeting. So end of my report.
Thank you.
4 hours later, yeah. Tried not to take 4 hours tonight, but.
Item number 7, Recreation Advisory Commission